Well, welcome for being here tonight. I truly appreciate getting to spend time with you and share different concepts. And yeah, we'll talk about some bazillionaires, but we'll talk about regular people tonight too, okay? I promise we're going to have fun. We're going to learn, but we're also going to participate. That means you have to help out. And so it's great if you proactively help. If you don't proactively help, I will pick on you. Okay, so you have to pay attention a little bit. The folks at home, just send your questions in. Tony will work with you the best you can. And now that the remote's working and everything's going along, well, it was working. Now the battery's fully charged. There we go. I get this question a lot. How much does the government spend? So last year, they spent 6.25 trillion. And here's a good little exercise to think about when we pay our tax to the Treasury. How much government does it pay for? Okay. So $1 million contribution to the U.S. Treasury charity is 0.0000016%. If we have 32 million seconds in the year, it's just died on us again. It's not happy. $1 million pays for 5 seconds. $100,000 tax payment pays for half a second. A $20,000 payment pays for 0.1 of a second of government operations on the federal level. It's hard to feel good about that, isn't it? Okay. All right. We have an expensive government. And man, this clicker is not a happy clicker. There we go. Most of us, when we look at estate planning, we're going to talk about 706s, and I didn't spend a lot of time on the initial slide, begin with the end in mind, because people had their butts up in the air. There's a lot of connotations we could have done with that slide. But most of us, when we look at a client's estate plan, we see this: a revocable trust of some type, things hopefully titled to the trust, whether they're titled or not, it doesn't matter, still their stuff. Life insurance, sometimes in the taxable estate, sometimes outside of the taxable estate, like in an ILIT or something. Typically some type of qualified plan, profit sharing plan, 401k. Of course, Roth is not qualified. And then sometimes we'll see a charity connection, donor advice fund, or private foundation or something. But I think most of us, when we look at everyone's estate plan, no matter what the net worth is, we kind of look for these primary components. Would you agree with that? Okay, so kind of normal. When we look at the distribution of the estate plan, we typically see the same thing: outright to all of my children equally. And when we ask our clients why equally, I love all my children the same. Even though one or two of them may not be good receivers of the inheritance, we love them all the same. 706 death tax returns. Who's done at least one? Wow, that's a good number. I wasn't expecting to see that many people with some numbers. Now, Paul and I were talking earlier, and Paul remembers doing tax returns back in 1997. Anybody remember what the unified credit was in 97? Yeah, it was nothing. I mean, it was crazy. And a tax rate of 55% back in those days. The thing about a 706 is kind of interesting. It's a long form, tons of schedules and stuff like that. If we sit down in front of a client and we yank this puppy out and start having a conversation about, do you have a taxable estate or not? That's not the right form, okay? Boy, this thing is... There we go. All right, so the history is this. A better thing is this little chart that I created. Here's 1997, showing the lifetime unified credit. And then we got this big red change. This is the tax rate at 55%, and then it dropped down to 0 in 2010. Anybody remember why? Why did it sunset? You don't remember the push in 2009? Margie's back there trying to eat and talk at the same time. Surely somebody's old enough to remember what happened in 2010. It's when the code sunset, didn't it? The Bush tax cuts. And so everybody was scrambling around in 2009 because we didn't know what the lifetime unified credit was going to be. And should we shelter assets now and freeze them, so that we could have the upward growth in some types of trust for estate tax planning, because the word was, oh my gosh, when they come back, it's going to be terrible. Freeze the credit now, because look at this big jump from 2008 to 9. It's like, this is two birds in the hand. We got to capture this now because they're going to go back to a low number. The reality is they came back for more taxes, but in 2010, some people did benefit with this new tax law. Remember the New York Yankees? A guy named Steinbrenner? He was lucky enough to die at the right time. And thankfully, he died that year and saved over $200 million in estate taxes. But they did still have a capital gains tax, because that was the year they tested that modified step-up in basis rule. And since we saw that it worked, I'm certain we will never see it again. Yeah, good luck with that. It worked. And if we were to think about that modified step-up in basis rule, would that be a good way to just get rid of the estate taxes across the board and just apply that rule to all estates at a low number? As a politician, I'm going to get rid of estate taxes. Vote for me. Even Joe Contractor out here who makes $25 an hour, he's going to vote yes. But not realizing by eliminating the estate tax rule and bringing in a modified step-up in basis rule, he may end up subject to a state tax, modified step-up in base rule, because his estate's like $500,000. So we've tested it. It worked. Here we are again, looking at another sunset, aren't we? Into 2025. So lifetime unified credit bumped up under Obama. Trump practically doubled it. Here we are, 2023. Inflation curve, remember this is inflation adjusted. And we have another sunset over here in 2026. So as the advisor, what can you tell your client to rely upon? It's become a game, hasn't it? I mean, client says, hey, I'm running an estate right now. I'm single. I'm about $7.5 million. I'm 65 years old. Should I be worried? We can't tell them definitively, no. We can't tell them definitively, yes. We can tell them that Mr. Steinbrenner died in the right year. You might want to consider that in 2025. That's the only thing that's going to be definite, okay? We have to kind of look at the stuff and think it through some. Boy, this clicker is not a happy clicker. There we go. All right. Do we all understand the difference in inheritance tax and estate tax? Remember, estate tax is a death tax, okay, based on the value of an estate. An inheritance tax is an inheritance that typically goes to somebody else that is not subject to the estate tax. So here's how this works. We still have 6 states today. I understand California a million years ago had an inheritance tax. Does anybody remember that? Okay, so it's theoretically gone away, right? So we still have 6 states today playing with inheritance tax. And the best way to think about the inheritance tax is that I died in one of these states and I left money to somebody who is not a blood relative. I left it next door to my neighbor, Johnny. Johnny's not related in any way, shape, or form. If I live in one of those states, Johnny might have an inheritance tax for Johnny to pay. Now, the estate tax comes from my estate, but the inheritance tax comes from the distribution to him. He has to claim it. So we don't see a lot of that. And then we have one state that just loves it all, Maryland. Maryland is decoupled from the federal code. Maryland has a state tax code, and Maryland has an inheritance tax. They love taxing that state as much as we do. Here's a photographic map that shows the states that have it. California's not on this, believe it or not, surprise. But our friends to the north, yeah, they're decoupled from the federal code. In fact, our friends to the north, Washington, 2.19 mil is the unified credit there. Oregon, look at that number. It rolls in here at about $1 million. And so when our clients leave California, because taxes are so bad and they move to Washington and Oregon, they need to move up there poor. I mean, you just have to accept this stuff. I was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho a few weeks ago, and I was meeting with a guy, and he was wanting to buy this beautiful $2 million home in Washington. and he wanted to move to Washington to be a resident of Washington, but he's a resident of Idaho today. Net worth in Idaho's $7 million. Don't have a problem. He moves his happy butt over here to Washington with a $7 million estate. He's got a tax problem. He just can't die there. And I'm like, dude, it's great that you're moving there. The home is beautiful, but you need to die over here in Idaho. Okay? Die back over here where your stuff is. Most people don't think about these things. We did see one state, Connecticut, come off the list this year. They're like, we're going to couple. We're just going to max the federal code. So there has been a little movement in this area, but not a lot. How about AB 259 here in California? Anybody familiar with this one? This is a wonderful one. It's the wealth tax. Can California have a death tax? Not without a constitutional amendment. Okay? But we can create other new taxes, can't we? We sure can. We're good in California at that. So there's a proposal. This is the third time it's been through the legislature. All right, Tony. There we go. Basically, the premise of this thing is your worldwide net assets to annually be reported and to pay a tax on it. From the tax preparation perspective, your client has a $1 billion globally, and annually this report has to be done. Think about that work. The appraisals from all over the globe that's probably not even in English. This is a disaster waiting to happen, but it's wonderful. It's only $1 billion for somebody married filing joint. We don't need to worry about it, do we? Well, the rest of the bill says this. After January 26, tax rate's only 1% for people with $50 million estate, married filing joint, 25 single. That's a 2-year provision. We're going to hammer the bazillionaires for the first 2 years, and then for the poor people at $50 million, we're going to come get them. The good news is, if this bill goes into law, I'm confident they will never lower this number to 20 million or 10 or 5. This is scary. It's unlikely it's going to get approved, but you never know. AB 259, keep an eye on that thing, okay? Right now, nobody cares because it's a billionaire's tax. If they just left it a billionaire's tax, I think I'd be okay with it. But it does establish a wealth tax advisory council. I think I want to be on that council. You know, I wonder what it pays. Here's how I try to explain 706 death for tax returns to families. What's all your stuff worth? How much debt do you have? This is your gross estate. We have to make it that simple for families to understand the purpose of a 706. Okay? If they have a gross estate, we subtract out the unified credit, which is quite generous right now. Sometimes ×2 if we're married filing joint. We get a net estate. If we live in a state with death tax or an exemption, we put that in there. California, 40%. That's net to the heirs. This is as simple as the client needs to understand this. We'll talk about IRAs and qualified money on a different slide, but for the purpose of saying, hey, this is 2025. I know you're flirting with some decent numbers here. I want to make you aware that we need to be thinking about maybe doing some proactive tax planning. What I don't want to have is January 1 of 2026 arrive and all this crying starts. Why didn't you tell me that we could have been doing something the last 2 years? I want that email or letter in my file that says, hey, you need to be aware of this. The code may change. Let's be proactive. Most of the state, we ain't got to worry about it. But more than likely, every one of you have clients with net worth greater than $5 or $6 million. We have to think about this a little bit. Is this making sense? Who I wanted to see a boring 706 discussion anyway? You know, begin with the end in mind. So the reporting of this thing is kind of like some of the trust administration stuff we do. Who all's done trust administration and probate reporting? You know, Well, a handful on that one. I hate probate reporting. But anyway, trust administration is a lot about reviewing docs, who's successor trustees, what authorities are in place, where are the assets, what's in the trust, what's out of the trust. Do we still have to go do probate anyway, even though we had a trust? Triggering appraisals. One thing I want to say about appraisals. I'm a huge fan of the attorney ordering the appraisal. Why? Because technically, if the attorney is ordering the appraisals, particularly for people that are still alive, there's a work product protection provision there. And so if there's a problem, particularly if I've got a client today trying to do a business valuation or appraisal, and that appraisal comes back and looks like a bombing run, if the attorney ordered it, it has a degree of protection on it because of privilege, which means 2 or 3 years down the road when my client's trying to sell that business, work product is privileged. So I'm a big fan of appraisals being ordered by attorneys if I'm suspecting anything that might not be perfect, okay? When we file a 706, we have 9 months to pay up, and we can ask for a 6-month extension. Service has made these a lot easier for us to do. An illiquid estate. Has anyone ever heard of this term right here, 6166? All right, so let's think about this. Here's Mr. and Ms. Smith. They have a 2,000-acre ranch and $800 in the bank. $40 million ranch. They die. Don't matter if it's now or later. We have an estate subject to estate taxes, right? So we get the case. We're putting all the things together. We've got the appraisal. $40 million goes on the 706 and $800. Tell the IRS we're illiquid. The IRS says, no problem. Would you like to just make payments? We have this program under Code Section 6166 where you can apply for the service to allow you to make payments. 6166. I'm not a fan of 6166 because it's the Hail Mary because nobody did good planning while you were alive. Here's the thing I really don't like about 6166. I met with a young man who's the successor trustee of an estate. They've already captured the lifetime unified credit from mommy and daddy. $150 million estate is still sitting there, so that is 100% subject to 40% tax rate. 40% of $150 million is a couple of bucks. The attorney recommended that since the estate has so many businesses and stuff in it, we're just going to do 6166. I'm like, perfect. I'm glad you guys already have this figured out. By the way, have you run the projections on what your payment schedule is going to be? He said, well, no. I said, well, why don't we think about that for a minute? 40% of $150 million is how much? I'm waiting on you guys to tell me. 40% of $150 million is how much? I got a 60 up here, 60, 60. How about a 61, 60? So about 60 grand, $60 million, right? What does it cost for the debt service on $60 million over the course of 10 years? And when the successor trustee, who was very business savvy, put those into calculations into the computer, he went, oh my God, we can't service that debt. I said, the good news is this. When you make your application under 61.6 to the IRS, they're going to do the same calculation, and they're going to come back and say, you puppies got to sell something, okay? And this is where we start ending up with people being upset. Think of it like this, 6166, when you're trying to get the IRS to float this loan on an illiquid estate, they're going to look at this just like a bank does. Can you service this debt? And the IRS is going to act just like a bank and go, 6166, not approved. You guys go figure something out. So 6166 is beautiful if the cash flow is there to service that debt. I would prefer to never see 6166 used, but it gets used. Okay? Just be aware of that. Qualified money. Qualified money is includable in the estate. Amen? Qualified money is an asset of the estate, period. It doesn't matter. I don't care if it's a traditional IRA or 4, it doesn't matter. It's includable on the 706. That they've got like 8 IRAs and 401ks. I think it's Schedule J. You just list each one of the accounts and what the total is, okay? Qualified money on a 706. Anybody know what the federal tax is on qualified money if you're subject to death taxes? It starts at 62% total tax. And that's hoping the kids live in Nevada. If they live in California, there's a state tax computation that goes with this. We're going to touch more on this in a minute. I get this a lot. 1031 exchanges. I love 1031 exchanges. Does everybody know what a 31 exchange is? Everybody? Exchange is property. We roll tax. We don't have a recognition. It's a beautiful thing. It is a great tool for creation, accumulation, utilization. Notice the word distribution's not up there. It is a beautiful tool for distribution if you get a step up in basis. Remember, nobody's talked recently about having the step up in basis rule removed, right? Unless you didn't read the Build Better Back proposal. Step up in basis rule. Is a great tool for creation, accumulation, and utilization. It is a fantastic tool if you're not subject to estate taxes. Why do you guys believe I say that? Well, let's think about it. If I sell an asset today that's subject to long-term capital gains, what's my tax? Let's say it's a $2 million building. So my long-term cap gains going to be 20 Fed. California is going to pop it at 13.3. Might be some net investment tax in here. But when you add all those together, are they more or less than 40%? Well, it's less than 40%. If the step up in basis rule is still here, it's a beautiful thing. If my estate is $12 million as a single person before 2026, I have no death tax. And if step up in basis is still here, it's a great thing. If I die after 2026 as a single person with this $12 million real estate portfolio, look at the tax bill. I got step up, but with a new unified credit in 2026, I have an estate that just became subject to death taxes. So from a 1031 planning perspective, which I love, the question becomes for this person right here, should we be doing some things different with an estate growing like that if we're doing 1031 exchanges all the time? Because the question becomes, are there things that we can use to buy real estate to compress, defer, I don't care what word you want to use here, to make it so that my death tax estate stays below my lifetime unified credit, but still have investment real estate? In my book, I write about 1031 exchanges are great until you become subject to death tax. At that point, you're paying more tax than had you just sold the asset today. I know it's not a lot of arbitrage there, but there is some arbitrage. But I'm just using 12 million. Remember, we're just thinking the unified credit's only going to come down to like 6.57. It's never going to go back to 3.5 or 1. Just never put that in writing. Okay? Portability. Show of hands for portability. It is probably one of the best tax secrets we have that we don't use. It is fantastic. It is free money. You've got to think of it like that. It is free money for portability when we do this. Here's the definition for those of you who downloaded the slides. I already heard people, yeah, we already read half your stuff. All right, great. Basically, mom and dad, there's the first death. Has anyone ever had clients die simultaneously? It's a really small number. Anyone? Mom and dad both died at the same time in a plane crash or a car crash, or they were at the dinosaur park and they both fell in. Okay? But here's the deal. You know, there's a dinosaur park. I saw the movie. So the unused portion of the first party is what we're trying to capture here. Okay, we're trying to capture the unused death person. Now, if I got an ABC trust, my C trust may kick in and solve all this, but a lot of people don't have it. So what are our options under portability? Do nothing. Okay. Wait for the IRS to show up and do it for us. Okay. Check the box on a 1040. What form did I check this box on? 706. This is not on the 1040. This is a 706. And does everyone need to elect portability? I don't know. If you've been watching this, it has greatly improved over the last 12, 13 years when they finally said, hey, this is driving us crazy. It's 5 years now. It's fantastic. When does it work? prevents the loss of first spouse's exemption, great way to clean up non-existent or improperly implemented estate plans. I'm certain none of your clients have a poorly written, bad written, not funded trust. Okay? I love trust, but sometimes they need a little help. The best way to claim this is just doing a simple 706. Yeah, you got to get some values. Yeah, you got to do a little reporting here. It's not too bad. And I beg of you that if you're thinking about doing 706s as a part of your practice, start here. Start on portability first because it's a lot easier to do, a lot less complications. You make a couple of bucks. The key thing is you freeze that asset over there. We get to put things in there, and then you have to think about what's the right things that we want to use over there in this trust. Date of death plus 5 years. Remember when this first started, it was a year, and then it changed. And so you can think about maybe some of my clients that have died in the last 5 years, the first death. And now they're coming in going, yeah, you know, the state's about $4.5 million right now, and I'm 54 years old. We may have missed a huge opportunity knowing that in 2026, we may be dropping down to a $6-7 million death tax. So we have to think about the ages of our clients and what their excess is. There is no magic number. We have to use the crystal ball and think through, does it make sense, and should we have this discussion about this? And I think as Mary and I were talking earlier about, you know, clients that could have done something years ago, and now they're looking at this giant tax bill because of the gain built into trust, and families just don't understand that. The other thing we have to think about is the survivor getting other inheritances. So here's my 54-year-old widow, $4 million estate, husband's deceased, we elect portability, okay, we got 2 and 2 protected. She inherits another $6 million. We have a problem. Thank goodness we elected the $2 million portability on the first death of the husband. This is how this thing rolls into giant financial opportunities. If you got a client who has fast-growing assets, I've got a doctor, he has a 31% average ROI on his investments. Everything this guy touches just turns to gold. We can't keep up with him. He made $600,000 in one day. And we're like, Doc, why are you practicing medicine? You know, quit that stuff. So we got to think about what the client's holdings are and if the survivor is very young. Now, a lot of our clients, husband and wife, are near the same age, you know. Occasionally we'll have one party that's like 45 years younger than the other party, you know, and the kids are older than the new spouse. That gets an interesting one, doesn't it? Yeah. And this one here, the survivor has children who love litigation lawyers. When crap hits the fan, who gets sued? Everybody. Why is this tax bill here? Why do I not get to enjoy these assets today? Why didn't this get elected back then? Cover your you know what. Have these emails, have these letters that show we need to have this discussion. There's value here for your heirs. Ignoring this just means they may lose more wealth in tax that could have been avoided. I like using the word, here's a tax we can avoid. Okay, what have I got to do? So back to the estate. These are the assets. The life insurance, it is considered a part of the taxable estate, just like the IRA. I had a case here in Placer County. Family went out and bought $20 million of life insurance. The estate was already $35 million. They bought the life insurance personally. So we just added $20 million to a $30 million estate, $35 million. So $55 million estate now. We just bought a $20 million life insurance policy that's going to be taxed at $8 million. Well, it gets better. The premiums for the life insurance policy are $627,000 a year. So in order for the client to service that, they're in the max tax bracket in California, they first have to earn $1.1 million, pay that tax, take the $627,000 to pay the premium on the life insurance policy for a policy that's inside the taxable estate. My net benefit here is $12 million with this poorly drafted plan, okay? Not even including my cost. When we stop and think about this, I could have had those clients put $627,000 in T-bills and outperform the life insurance policy. We just have to think this stuff through. Clicker's mad. All right. Donor advice funds. Anybody have a client with a donor advice fund? I love these things. They're fantastic. Simple. You don't have to do the tax return. You just have to report they made a gift. They're easy peasy. So when we look at charitable receptivity, and I'm going to go ahead and ask, did everyone in here donate to at least one charity last year? Yeah, we probably all do. On average, 70% of the nation donates to 5 or more charities every year. So we are a philanthropically giving nation. So yeah, a lot of us are really motivated. Some are really, really motivated. We have some people who won't make a gift to a charity, even if their mom is standing in the soup line at the kitchen. Okay? So here we go. Donor advice funds. Think of it like this. It's the 501c3 public charity, and they're acting as an administrator. Schwab has them, Fidelity has them, community foundations. It's the same concept. There are tons of these all over the country. So here's Mr. and Ms. Smith. They set up a fund underneath that umbrella. It's a segregated account. And most of these organizations will allow their personal financial planner be involved with the management of any funds in the donor advice fund. Mr. and Ms. Smith make a gift to the charity. The charity reports the gift appropriately to you in the documents, letters, etc. They get the deduction, and they allocate that money into their segregated fund. So if it's like $1,000, there goes the $1,000. It's in their fund. And basically, the administrator of this thing is going to say, hey, we will let you give away that money to any 501c3 public charity you want in the nation. Knock yourself out. Just send us a letter. It's beautiful. It's easy. It's fantastic. Oh, I want my financial planner to manage that money. Okay. A few rules about what you can't invest in because you got to be a little safe with charitable money here. So here's the deal. The charities administering all of these funds, distributing these grants to all types of U.S. public charities. Offshore charities is a problem because of the Patriot Act, but it's a beautiful thing. Paperwork's nothing. No formation docs, no lawyers, nothing. So let's have some fun with charitable gifts. And this is going to be a stretch on your part. Think about your clients. Does anyone have clients who come in every year with all the W-2s, 1099s, and those charitable receipt letters? Here's all my charitable receipt letters, Tony. And Tony takes them, he fills out the return. And as we look at page 1 of the 1040, married filing joint, you all know the deductions for standard, right? So I gave Tony all my deductions. It was $5,000 for last year. Yes, that was a good thing. So, and you remember when they changed the code and we stopped doing Schedule A's so much? Did all you guys notice that we don't have to do as many Schedule A's because of the new code, because the deduction's so high? So I give Tony my $5,000, and Tony puts it in the computer. It was all cash, line 11, ends up on line 14, goes down to line 17, and then Tony brings that $5,000, assuming nothing else is on Schedule A, over here and compares it to this and goes, well, automatically they're going to want the maximum standard deduction because clearly it's better than $5,000. Do you guys see that? How many of you have clients who bring in these deductions? They assume that deduction is counting because it is 100% tax deductible. Tony claimed the standard deduction. So where's my $5,000 gift on this tax return? Show me where it saved me a single penny. Not there, is it? But me, the Joe consumer, I'm going to come in and see the tax return. I'm going to see what I either owe or what I'm getting a check for, and I'm going to automatically assume my charitable gift counted. The next question I have for you, the bottom line, line 18. If you elect to itemize deductions, even though they are less than your standard deduction, check this box. Have ever in your career you checked that box? Out of all the hundreds of people I've spoken to about this, no one has ever checked the box. I don't know why it's even on there. I mean, it's like, I've got a 1-digit IQ. Check this box here. Could have been something like that, maybe. This way, one claims not and the other one gets it all. It's rare, isn't it? So I've never seen it. I'm glad to hear that somebody's at least seen it once in their career, you know, but at least it's on there. I mean, hey, I have the right to overpay my tax. There's no rule against overpayment, is there? Yeah. So when we think about these charitable gifts using the DAF, is there a way that I can manipulate the code to get a charitable gift? Here we go. The charitable donor advice fund is I can just let money sit in there and just grow. I don't have to distribute a penny. Unlike a private foundation, remember, we got to kick out money from a private foundation every year, about 5%. I can give money to my donor advice fund while I'm alive, and I can leave a gift in my will or trust to say, I want $50,000 to go to my donor advice fund when I'm dead. I can do that too. It helps me teach my kids how to handle money. So we got $5,000 in a donor advice fund. We have a family meeting in Thanksgiving time period. Kids, we're going to give away $4,000. What do you recommend? It's a great discussion to start getting the kids involved. We're not giving away millions. We're just giving away 4,000. And we're letting the kids give mom and dad input to the charities that they think are important. Mom and dad are getting a little intel and reconnaissance, aren't they? These are the charities my kids care about. Now I know why my kid likes that charity. We have more discussions to think about with the kids and talks at dinner. It's a really cool way. Mom and dad can just always give the money to charities that they like. But when I can glean a little information from my kids, that helps me think more about the estate plan that I need to leave for them. I love intel. I can set it up so that my donor advice fund, when I die, turns into an endowment. Who can tell me what an endowment is? I'm not going to answer it, so y'all got to answer it. What's an endowment? It's like a scholarship program. So let's say I have $100,000 in my donor advice fund. I'm dead. I've left instructions to say, I want you to turn my $100,000 into a permanent endowment, dole out 3% a year to the XYZ hospital, church, whatever. I have just created a perpetual fund, and they do all the admin. It's real easy peasy. I love these things. Here's a good trick. Ooh. Has anyone heard this term bunching? Bunching. I don't mean a bunch of apples. Charitable bunching. Okay? So when we think about the estate and the donor advice fund that's sitting over there, and I'm thinking about my 1040, it went crazy again, Tony. There we go. And we're thinking about our 1040. When I gave Tony the $5,000, he went ahead and claimed my standard deduction, didn't he? But what if I were to load up my donor advice fund this year with, say, $40,000? Let's say I'm single. I'll load $40,000 of cash or stock into my donor advice fund. You're going to claim that on Schedule A, line 14, and it's $40,000 scheduled. Is that bigger than single line 12? Are you following me here? So I'm going to load my donor advice fund up this year. I'm going to dole out $5,000 a year for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. Because if I stayed the same path of just giving Tony $5,000 a year for my tax returns, I would have never got a tax deduction. But if I load up my donor advice fund, go beyond my standard deduction, he gets to claim it, I get some tax benefits, and then I just dole that money out like I was going to do anyway. And I can call my financial planner and say, hey, I got $40,000 in a donor advice fund. Can you get me 4, 5, 6% return on the money? It's called bunching. Pretty cool strategy. Notice I didn't use millions. I just used 40 grand. And when we look at a lot of our clients, they give $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year. They're not getting a penny tax benefit. So here we are back to the normal estate. That's why I like that donor advice fund to be in there for regular people like us. Let's talk about charitable giving. How are we doing on time, Tony? I got over an hour. An hour and 20? Tony was like, dude, you got like 104 slides. You're going to be able to go over all that? There. Yes, sir. Not yet, but we're going to talk about that. Okay. There's a lot of good things coming for charitable IRA structures. It just takes a long time for us to get there. Do I need to spend any time on this chart right here? Probably not. Timing of charitable gifts. When I say this gift is a current gift, that means it is in their hand today. Complete control and dominion over that asset, whether it's land, asset, it doesn't matter. I've made a current gift, they have it. I no longer have control. When I say that a charitable gift is deferred, that means maybe I'm using something like a charitable trust today to get the income tax benefits and some other benefits with the charitable trust, but the gift to charity is deferred until the terms of the trust are completed. I could say I want a 15-year charitable trust. At the end of 15 years, that gift is completed to the charity because the deferment period's over. Most of us see charitable trusts that are designed for what? Years or lives? It's normally lives, isn't it? Okay, it just works out well. And then testamentary means they is dead. Okay? I got to use some Alabama terms every now and then just so I can keep you guys awake, all right? Oh, man. Oh, wow, it went crazy. Private foundations. About the only phone calls I get about private foundations is how do we undo these things? Because of these reasons. Painful. Okay, so does anybody have a client with a private foundation? Because I don't want to spend any time here unless I absolutely have to. Okay. Gifts to foundations. Private foundation rules compared to public charity rules. Notice there's a difference in the deductibility here in the nature and character, cash versus stock versus dirt versus step up and basis. Lots of limitations on private foundations. Most of our clients give to public charities. Here's something that a lot of people, I want to go to that side so bad it's not funny, but the camera's over here. Does anyone ever claim the 50% AGI rule instead of the 60% for cash or the 30% for stock? Let me bake this a little bit better. If I have a $10,000 block of stock that has a basis of $9,000, I've got $1,000 of gain in here, right? So technically that falls under the 50% rule, doesn't it? I have an appreciated asset that I've donated to charity. So if I give the $10,000, that 30% rule is applicable. But because my basis is so high, it might make sense to claim that as a basis deduction under Code Section 170H something another. Let me give you an example. This is an actual case I had in Placer County. Second tranche of money from the business sale, $7-point-something million. The first tranche of money was an absolute, oh my gosh, lots of tax issues. They learned some painful lessons. Second tranche of money, they're kind of like, hey, we want to be better this time. And they decided to give $5 million to charity. Okay. So the investment advisor, when he got the second tranche of money, put the monies into a portfolio. Right here, COVID time period, markets were kind of doing their normal thing of nothing, just kind of flat. And so after a year and a half, they donated that portfolio to charity. The gain was $200,000 on $5 million. Should we claim the 30% rule or the 50% rule? And when we look at all the money landed in our tax return, it actually penciled out for them to claim the basis rule. So every now and then you'll have somebody say, hey, let's look at the basis deduction for this gift instead of just the fair market value gift. Okay, it does impact how we report on a tax return. If I've got a client who can use a bigger deduction and my gain is small, I'm probably going to go to the basis rule to get the bigger deduction. I've done this with a lot of publicly traded stock. They've had the stock for a long time. It had some gain, but nothing fancy. The deduction was better under the 50% rule. Kind of cool. And everybody's going, well, how does that happen? Yeah, Tony?
Yeah, question for you.
Yes, sir.
Does a donor advice fund take the place of charitable relief trust for most purposes?
Actually, no. The question is, does the donor advice fund take the place of a charitable remainder trust? We're actually going to answer that question in another slide in a minute. They're two completely different animals for the purposes of the person monitoring in case they fall asleep in the next 5 minutes. Okay, so here's the deal. On a donor advice fund, it's a completed gift. In a charitable trust, it's a completed gift, but the money has not got to charity yet. Okay, we're going to walk you through the charitable trust rules here in just a little bit. Trick question, trick question, trick question. And Randy, I think you know this answer, so you got to be quiet. If I made $1 million this year, what is the maximum amount of money and assets that I can donate to charity? What's the max limit? Thank you. Who said that? There's no cap. I can donate as much to charity as I want to, but there is another rule, isn't there? It's how much can I claim? Okay. So if I have $1 million taxable income, I give cash, 60% rule applies. If I give appreciated stock, real estate, 30% rule applies. That makes sense? Because we're going to build on this. Okay. Getting into the question that just came in, talking about charitable remainder trust. I love charitable remainder trust because when we stop and think about it, does anybody know what the maximum money that I can put into a traditional IRA each year? Anybody know that number for an IRA, traditional IRA? 7,500. And what's the most I can put into a 401k if I'm older? 27,000, 27. What's the most I can put into a charitable remainder trust? There's no limit. So let's think about this for a minute. If I've got somebody who's funding IRA 401ks, doing nothing else fancy, maybe they're just a high income earner making $600,000 a year or $300,000 a year, and they go, there's got to be something I can do. I've already funded my 401k. I've already done everything I can. I've got this whopper tax bill. I'm trying to build more retirement. Charitable remainder trust is a retirement plan when you stop and think about it. I can design the charitable remainder trust to say, I'm going to put the assets in today, get the tax deduction now, and then I don't want an income stream until 26 years down the road. That charitable remainder trust is going to grow just like an IRA 401k, compound tax deferred. So I'm going to see the same results in my charitable trust as I'm going to see in the 401k. The only difference is I got a whopper tax deduction today. And then when I get to retirement age and my charitable trust starts kicking out money, not all of it is ordinary income. Remember, charitable remainder trust are Tier 4 accounting rules. And so depending on how the financial advisor manages this money, wouldn't it be cool if that CRT could be kicking me out a payment that's subject to capital gains and a little bit of income? I just blew the doors off of 401k. 401k is going to be distributed at what type of tax? Ordinary. Who wants to be in a future tax rate that you don't know what it's going to be? Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem with retirement. We want control. We want knowledge. Okay? So again, Schedule A, 60% rule, 30% rule. We're going to roll some of this stuff into some charitable giving. The charitable gift annuity and charitable remainder trust. Has anyone ever seen a charitable gift annuity with a client? I love the charitable gift annuity, and I wrote about that in my book too. My book is up here if you want a copy. Please just take a copy. This requires an attorney. This does not. This typically needs $150,000, $200,000 to get started. This can be done with $5,000. This has a tax return requirement. This does not. I can have this one started any time or delayed. I can start this one now or delayed. This is the poor man's CRT. Just think of it like that. The average charitable gift annuity for the nation is $37,000. Why do we not hear about the charitable gift annuity? The first problem we have is the financial planning community can't sell them, can't manage them. The charitable gift annuity is a product that is offered by a charity. It is not offered by the investment companies. The investment advisor gets how much commissions on a charitable gift annuity? 0. I love the gift annuity. We'll talk about these a little bit. I love the charitable remainder trust. But not everybody makes $1 bazillion and can use the tax deduction. Charitable lead trust. Has anyone heard of this one? If we need more time tonight, I'll roll into a charitable lead trust and pooled income fund. By the way, the pooled income fund is a great strategy. You don't see a lot of these guys either. There's about 700 charities in the nation that has the pooled income fund. So think of it like this. The charity sets up a pooled income for me, okay? Or I join one that they've got. I give them $100,000. I want them to start sending me a check. It's a total return fund. So whatever is earned in the fund, they send it to me as ordinary income. If I get an 8% growth this year, it comes to me. If the fund has a 2% ROI, 2% comes to me. All ordinary, but my tax deduction for the pooled income fund is 2 to 3 times greater than the charitable remainder trust. The pooled income fund is another secret tool that's out there that hardly no one knows about. Stanford University, I think, has 3 to 7 of these things. Purdue, I mean, the major places have them. The problem with the pooled income fund is when the plan giving director is in charge of the charity's fundraising events, they know this is what people have heard about. They know nobody's heard of that. So what's all their marketing materials going to be directed toward? Yeah. And it's sad. This is a powerful hammer. Big one. I love that guy. The lead trust gets a little complicated. Has anyone done a charitable lead trust of any type? It's pretty rare to see these. There's less than 10, 15,000 of these in the country that I know of. So deferred value calculation. So present value, future value, you guys are probably familiar with a lot of this stuff. Does everybody know what the 75-20 AFR rates are, what we call the midterm 120% rule? I think everybody that does any type of calculations is familiar with that. So let's look at the charitable remainder trust tax deduction. I'm using $1 million. You can take off a 0. You can add a 0. I have to use round numbers. I'm from Alabama, 2-digit IQ, roll tide. So we got to make this simple for me to teach it, okay? So you guys are in a good spot. Why is it that when these two people at these ages put $1 million into the same type of trust, why is there a difference in this calculation? Exactly. This puppy here is closer to meeting God than this person is. And so one of the calculations we have to do in a charitable remainder trust has to add in the actuarial value of the donor. So the older they are, the bigger the tax deduction. Here's some of the challenges that I see with the remainder trust. Let's put $1 million into a charitable remainder trust for somebody 29 years old. We're not going to pass the life expectancy test. The numbers are going to crash. Has anyone done a charitable remainder trust at all? See those every now and then, they're kind of rare. I love these tools, but the attorneys, they're not exactly the people we need to call to get information about tax reporting calculations. They're really good at words, okay? And so I'll see a charitable trust that says John and Mary Smith have created the charitable remainder trust for their lives and their children's lives. And we're going to have the payout rate at 17%. That trust ain't going to work. It's just not going to flow. And I don't want to get too deep on it, but I'll kind of walk you through some of the things to work through. The types of charitable gift annuities are just as varied as the charitable remainder trust. Immediate, 1 life, 2 life, separate property, joint property. There's a lot of ways to do this. But for most people that we have in our offices today that are in the working class, that have funded their IRA, have funded their 401k, and they're philanthropically motivated, the deferred gift annuity. I walk into my favorite charity that's authorized to do this. The big ones, obviously, Salvation Army, Red Cross, Goodwill, they all can do this. I walk in there with my check for $10,000. I want to do a gift annuity contract. It's a 2-page document. I can take it to my attorney who's going to go, I've never seen one. It's a 2-page document. Here's the check for 10. They stroke the things on there for 10,000. Here's your age. When do you want the check to start the payment to you? I don't know. Who knows exactly when they're going to retire? So that's why I like the oh, retirement or die. That's the kind of way I am. And that's the reason I like this deferred model, because the agreement is, I'm giving you the 10 grand today. This is a completed gift. There's a contract between me and the charity. Charity's going to take care of that money. Charity's going to do all the reporting. I just got to give the deduction letter to my tax professional. And when I'm ready for you guys to send me a check, I'll send you a letter. And so 14 years and 3 months today, I stroke that letter, dear charity, start sending me a check. There may be another charitable deduction here for the donor if I've really waited a long time, because when they did the computations on my first gift, when I made it that day, They just went ahead and assumed an age like 65. What if I wait till age 75 to start the flow of money? I'm going to get another tax deduction. Okay. Again, financial planners get to do how many charitable gift annuities? Zippo. I haven't got anything wrong with financial planners, but the problem is the only people promoting this who can legally promote this are charities. And you know what their marketing budgets are, right? It's just a great little tool. Okay. Are we learning? Yes, ma'am. I can actually tell them. The question is, when I go in to see the charity to do the calculation of this, I can actually tell them, go ahead and use age 70 for the calculation today. I can pick whatever number I want. The charity will typically run the calc for me, and they'll just go ahead and give me the tax deduction based on that. So if I run this calc at age 70 and I decide to turn the letter on at age 62 to get the money, they're going to reverse these charges back into the payments to me. In other words, they're going to balance it out. It's still a great deal because that $10,000 I gave the charity, that money's growing compound tax deferred. So when I get to that target age, I'm not getting a check based on 10 grand. I'm getting a check based on what that new annuity amount is. Kind of cool. Simple, easy peasy. If you guys like the charitable gift annuity, we can definitely pull the skin back on that thing and look at that onion because it's a beautiful thing. I like the gift annuity. It's in my book. There's tons of information out there on it. And this is not for rich people. Now, the biggest one that I'm aware of has been $12 million into a charitable gift annuity. So, but normal people is $5,000 to $15,000. I see that all the time. Cool thing. Donor gets a tax deduction. Here's another cool thing about the gift annuity. My CRT expert, was it you, Margie? Yeah. So when I'm getting my payments from my CRT, how much of it's return of principal, zero tax? It has to be a really bad scenario, doesn't it? Here's the deal on the charitable gift annuity. Until my life expectancy, part of it is tax-free return of principal, automatic in a gift annuity. For me to get to principal return in a CRT, a lot of bad things have happened. I've had no growth. I'm having to reach into principal. Ugh. We don't want to do that. It's beautiful, and it's reported on 1099-R. Here's an example. I know none of your clients have money at the bank earning nothing or stock market earning nothing. Everybody's getting like 14% on their CDs and stuff. The show of hand, how many people remember CDs paying 14%? Yeah. Yeah. People, young people look at me, what? I thought it was 1.2. Yeah. Shopping for rates. So let's say we have somebody single, 75, they want an immediate CGA. Let's say they got a bank CD earning nothing. They take $30,000. All these calculations get done. So we take an asset that was producing 48, I'm sorry, the tax deduction here, it computes out to $4,800, may or may not move the needle much on the tax return. Here's the difference. My CD at 1.2 is giving me that per year. My gift annuity is giving me that per year. Which one's mo better? And this is just on 30 grand. And if these people have a provision in their estate plan that says, when I die, I'm going to leave this much money to charity, why don't we get some tax deductions? Because most people, when they leave money to charity, where do we put that tax deduction? Yeah. It's not a lot of deployment for that thing. 706 is helpful, but we got to have some big money going on. That's the effective payout rate when you compare these numbers. This is a charitable planning tool giving a 9.7% payout rate compared to 3% CD. Kind of cool stuff. How we doing on time? All right. This is my church. I was raised in Alabama, Mount Carmel, outside of Davie, Alabama. We have a football team. Did I mention that? All right. We're not doing too good this year, but we go to big church. We get there at 10 o'clock in the morning, sing, pray, break up into groups. I'd go downstairs to Sunday school, and Miss Margaret Keith would give me a Sunday school lesson. I was 5 years old in 1965. You can do the math. Yeah, I'm 63 now. So Miss Margaret would give us a lesson for about an hour, and after an hour, we'd go upstairs to big church. Well, during that Sunday school lesson, toward the end, Miss Margaret passed out these little white envelopes. You remember those little white envelopes, and you'd write your name on it when you're 5 years old, and you'd lick all the stuff off of it, because when you're 5 years old, you're just going to lick it off. And then you put a nickel in. Now think about 1965, a nickel bought the big candy bar. Okay, so you was tithing it at 5 years of age, putting that nickel in that puppy. So we go upstairs, and if you didn't have a nickel, Miss Margaret brought a nickel. We go upstairs to big church at 11 o'clock, sing, pray, sermon, and then the offering plate comes around, and here's my argument. We have taught the entire country how to do this wrong. Hear me out. 5 years ago, went and met with an investment advisor. I had $40,000 burning a hole in my pocket. We bought 4 investments at $10,000 a pop. Okay. Over the 5 years, 2 of those puppies did really, really good, didn't they? I call those racehorses. 1 did okay, kind of plateaued at the end of year 2, and it's been kind of flat. My financial planner will tell me that's a stagnant asset, and there's a lost opportunity cost on that money. You had $10,000, which grew to about $20,000 or so. I'm sorry, 50 by that time. That's not going to grow anymore. If I sell that asset, what happens? You got cap gains. And then this other one, Uncle Joey said, this company's going to go to the moon, sit on it forever. Okay. Again, trying to help people understand the time value of money. Racehorses are better than donkeys. Donkeys are better than rocks. So how many rocks do you want to have in your portfolio? How many donkeys do you want to have in your portfolio? How many racehorses do you want to have in your portfolio? It gets to be kind of simple, doesn't it? All right. So here's this person who's made this decision to make a gift. I'm using 50 grand. You can take off a 0. You can add a 0, but I want you to focus on the concept. Don't worry about the number. Charitable tax loss harvesting. If we make a gift of $50,000, again, using $1 million, because clearly I'm going to have to show that we're in a 50% tax bracket. This person, yeah, I know there's a progressive code, et cetera, but here's the deal. To make this simple, roll tide, 2-digit IQ. If I'm $1 million, 50% tax bracket, my tax bill's $500, I take home $500. Okay? If I make a gift of $50,000 to charity, we reduce the AGI by 50. Now my AGI is $950. My tax bill at 50% is $475. I take home $475 because I gave charity $50,000. Everybody good with the math? Okay? So here's the deal. $50,000 bought me $25,000 of tax savings. Right? Okay. So here's my standard deduction. Here's Schedule A, line 14, line 17, assuming nothing else is on my lines on my Schedule A. $50,000 is clearly bigger than whatever standard deductions on this page. Amen? All right. So we have the cash gift basis, bought me $25,000. We have the stock gift. We gave away the donkey, the poorly performing asset. It grew from 10 to 50. We gave the donkey away, had the basis, buys 50 same tax rate. Bought the same tax savings, didn't it? Schedule A, it's still 50-50. It doesn't matter if it's cash or stock. Line 17 is still 50. It still goes to Schedule A. Line 12, it still bought me $25,000 tax savings, whether I gave cash or stock. Are these two gifts the same financially? To the donor, are they the same? They're not. One of these gifts nets a $15,000 profit to the donor. Let's think about it. I've only got 10 grand in that donkey. Charity was happy to take that donkey because it was worth 50 grand to them. My 10 grand bought $25,000 of tax savings. The net difference between my basis and my net tax savings was $15,000. We just created two tax benefits for the client by giving poorly performing appreciated assets instead of cash. It doesn't matter whether this is $1,000, $50,000, or $8 million. It's the strategy. So the way to do this, I have the check for 50 grand in my hot hand, ready to go give it to charity. Stop. I want you to go give that $50,000 to your financial planner. I want your financial planner to buy a new stock with a new basis, hopefully racehorses. And then I want your financial planner to find the donkeys and give the donkeys to the charity. The client is $15,000 better off. On the forms, it's the same. When I teach this at financial planning institutions, they look at me like I have lost my mind. We're not doing anything that's going to reduce our assets under management. For the financial planners with the 3-digit IQs, and they figure out, wait a minute, we're getting rid of the donkeys, that's not improving at all. We're giving that donkey to charity. They're giving me 50 grand to replace it. Unless we all die the next day, chances are their portfolio is healthier and we're going to have a better portfolio next year. This is how we as tax advisors help our clients go, have you thought about giving some poorly performing? Now, I know none of your clients have poorly performing stock. They all have racehorses. But in case you know a tax professional that has poorly performing stock, and we know they're giving, we did their tax return last year. We saw what they gave us. This is huge. And it's also fundamental for the next thing we're going to learn about. Did we just make money off the IRS giving the right thing the right way? Yes, we did. And I've got a handout for that if you want this. I did this presentation about 5 years ago in this concept. My phone blew up. How'd you do that? So I ended up having to write a little paper on, here are the steps. Tell the lawyer this, tell the CPA this, tell the financial planner this. If you want to copy that, just send me an email. I'll fly it to you. The secret to tax mitigation is this. It's not the structure. It's this. Timing, combining, and sequencing. That's our value to help the client figure out how do we take this tax return and make it do great things for us. Ruh-roh, Tony. We got a question? Oh. So charitable remainder trust. Somebody asked a question about this earlier. It's irrevocable, hopefully established by a lawyer, not somebody off the internet, funded with cash, stock, or real estate. I get to pick how many years I want. I can go for life. In a few cases, I can go for life plus a little bit more. Get a current deduction. If I have too much deduction because of that 30, 50% rule on my deduction rule for Schedule A, I can carry forward. Anyone ever done a carry forward on a charitable deduction before? That's fantastic, isn't it? I love that. Income subject to four-tier accounting rule. This is where we have to help the financial planner. The financial planners typically don't know how to manage money in a charitable trust environment. All they know, there are some prudent man rules and fiduciary rules and don't invest in this. If we're trying to target a certain rate of return, the opportunity becomes, how do we create a return that creates more capital gains benefits to the client? So if I have $10,000 coming in per year from my charitable trust, do you want it all to be ordinary income? Or with just a little bit of financial management tweaking here, what if 5,000 of it is ordinary and 5,000 of it is cap gains? Potentially, that's another tax benefit to the donor, isn't it? So you have to kind of help the financial planner go, hey, everything you're investing here is ordinary income. Have you thought about doing something that's a capital gains distribution rule? They don't know. Yes, ma'am.
Well, kind of usually read both ways. But if you charitable remainder trust, no attorney that you can remember is going to last forever, and you don't know where the documents are. But the prior CSEA was not taking any income from CRT on the tax return.
Was there a distribution made? So the question was, so clients had two charitable remainder trusts, was taking distribution, and the income's not being reported to the client as an income payment to the client. There's two lawyers and two financial planners in Ohio this past year who were doing these really cool things with the charitable annuity trust. Nobody paid any taxes. I don't know which jail they're in today. And then a distribution from a charitable remainder trust is reported. Period. I don't care if it's return of principal, it's still reported. Yeah. You have to report distributions on a charitable trust. People get nervous of this thing called the 5%, 50%, 10% test. You ever heard of that term before? I'm going to do this charitable trust. I got to run some calcs. How many people use like Tiger and all these other different types of tax software systems, Lacert? We can throw some numbers in here, but basically for the normal charitable remainder trust, we have to pay out at least 5%, not more than 50%. So when you see the charitable trust says 88%, no, it's 50% is the most we can distribute. Think about the math on it. I put $100,000 into a CRT that's got a 50% payout trust. I've done this once. 50% payout trust. $100,000 goes in today. I have to distribute how much the next year? 50%. So there goes 50%. How much is in my trust the next year? Well, 50,000. I just kicked out. A year later, I kicked out 50 again. Now I'm down to 25. A year later, I'm down to 12.5. So unless my financial planner is getting me about a 55 to 65% return on investment here, this is going to crash. And then we have to think about the 10% test. Remember the slide earlier where the person 75 and the other person 55, and there was 2 different deductions because of their ages, the life expectancy test? That's what this puppy is. So I put $100,000 in a charitable trust this year, 5%, 50, I don't care what the rate is. The test they're looking for here, if I'm 63 years old today, I put $100,000 in this thing. We look at the AFR rate and a few other variables. The question the IRS wants to have answered, here's all the tax deductions you're going to enjoy for this $100,000. Shouldn't there be a safety net that some money is going to go to charity regardless? Because if we don't put this safety net in here, would it be possible that we could create a charitable remainder trust where charity never got a dime? So that's what the 10% test is about, is to make certain that with all these variables, that at the end of the day, charity gets the appropriate money that correlates to the deductions that I'm enjoying today. That's the whole purpose of it. And so when you hear somebody say, yeah, based on these variables, this charitable trust is crashing, we're failing a test, and it is normally that one. Okay? Two types of charitable remainder trust. Some people say, I want a definite check, fixed amount every month. That's an annuity trust, okay? Charitable annuity trust. Typically, getting back to that 10% test, this is good for people over the age of 72. When somebody comes into me and says, hey, we're going to do this charitable remainder trust, charitable remainder annuity trust for somebody 42 years old, I don't even have to get the computer out. I already know we're younger than 72, we're probably going to crash that 10% test. This is a great trust for people over 72 who want a fixed check. The bulk of charitable trusts in this nation are called uni trust, charitable remainder uni trust, CRUTs for short. It's a payout. So if my trust is a 6% payout, that means every January 1st, we look at what is in the account. There's $300,000 in the account, multiplied by 6%. What should my payout be for this next year? 18 grand. Whether it's monthly, quarterly, or whatever, January 1st is my snapshot on the account. We go to the payout rate of the charitable trust. That's what we're going to distribute this next year according to the terms of the trust. The most common trust there is. You do need to worry when you get down to ages 40, making this thing work with a 10% test. It's a real simple thing. I like the unit trust because it gives your money a chance to keep up with the cost of inflation over time, unless you're greedy. Do I have any financial planners in the room? Anybody manage money? Any of you guys? So when I look to the financial planner, I'll ask the question, this client wants an 11% payout trust and we're passing all the tests. Are you comfortable getting 12 to 13% ROI every year from now on? No. So I like for the trust to be conservative if at all possible, because I don't want to be eating into principal and making this trust less effective. Kind of like that 100,000, 50% rule. I don't want to run out of money. How are we doing on time, Tony? We got 45 minutes? Is that the way this works? 45 minutes, 8:15? Yeah. 8:40? Okay. These are the different types of trust that are charitable. This one's the most common. Here's my charitable trust that says we're going to pay out 6%. We're going to pay it out monthly. And I put an illiquid asset in this puppy. Piece of dirt. Piece of real estate. I put the real estate in here. It doesn't sell for another 2 years. The trust document says, because it's a type 1, immediate payout. I just put an illiquid asset in here. The trust has no money in it, but the trust mandates I shall give out money monthly based on this percentage rate. Did we just blow up this trust? Yeah, we did. So we want to use a thing called a flip unit trust, where the language says, we know we're donating illiquid assets in here. We're going to select the payout rate, but we are not going to pay you until the illiquid asset is liquidated. Does that make sense? So whenever you see somebody putting an illiquid asset into a charitable remainder trust, we want to make certain that that language is in here and has not been an oversight by the drafting attorney. Remember, most attorneys will do one charitable trust their entire career. So they're not going to be a whole lot of experience coming to the table with most attorneys. There are a handful of attorneys who do this all the time. That's the attorney we want to use. Okay? 5227, anybody doing these puppies? Again, irrevocable trust, charitable trust, pretty simple stuff. 8283, anyone seen any of these where we have charitable gifts in excess of $500? You got to do this form. The IRS eats these for lunch. The University of Michigan, which has a decent football team sometimes, received a $31 million gift in 2018 or 19 because the 8283 was not properly done. Deduction denied, baby. They're pretty brutal on these things. So if you've got a big 8283, it is worth somebody else taking a peek at it. I got one today. Oh yeah, this one's wrong. But luckily it was only on 2.3 million. Can I give an S Corp stock to a donor advised fund? The answer is yes. Can I give S Corp stock to a charitable trust? Well, you can. However, this is a boo-boo. You cannot give S Corp stock to a charitable trust. Not a qualified asset to give. There is a way to give S Corp stock to a donor advised fund, and then there's a lot of ways to do this wrong. Has anyone heard of this case recently? So here we have the tax memo. Grandpa started this business in 1927. It went to the kids, then to the 3 grandkids, valued at $80 million in 2014. Set up a DAF at Fidelity, a donor advised fund. Okay. And then one of the owners decided that him and his spouse was going to give $3.5 million to their donor advised fund. It's okay to do this. You can give S Corp stock to a donor advised fund, but there's a lot of T's you got to cross here, okay? It's not as simple as just giving a public charity stock. So they decided that in the purchase agreement of the sale of this company, that's what they wanted to do. An email just days before the gift certificate, the stock certificate is written up, etc. This person sends an email to their attorney. I do not want to transfer the stock until we are 99% sure of this closing. Any problems with that? Yeah. The IRS has got a big thing about being involved with the gift that is a part of something that's about to happen. So if I were to say 3 years from, this date, 3 years ago, I want to go ahead and donate $3.5 million of the value of my company to the donor advised fund today. There it goes. 3 years later, I'm going into negotiations to sell my business. The buyer is going to buy my stock and my stock that's in a donor advised fund. Totally fine. But when we do things like last minute, we're going to transfer the stock into the company. The IRS says that's too close. You should have done this long before you did an initial agreement, a final agreement, a purchase agreement. And the dates on these things were horrible. Board meeting in June, new co set up in July. We didn't even put a date on the gift to the donor advice fund stock certificate. Let's leave it blank. This way the IRS will never figure it out. 10 July, the DAF was set up. We didn't set the DAF up until after all of this. Again, another bad step, timing, combining, sequencing. Donated 1380 shares on the same day the DAF was set up. Now we put the number on the stock certificate. Do you see how this just snowballs? Commissioner sends them a letter in 2017 going, boys and girls, this was out of sequence. And the icing on the cake was, remember that 82, 83 we talked about earlier that has to be perfect? It can't be done by the guy at the 7-Eleven store. The IRS wants to see a qualified appraiser here. Since things are in such a rush, a good person at Fidelity who is not an appraiser, who is not an attorney, who is not an accountant said, I'll take care of it. They wrote a check. Secure Act 1, Secure Act 2, Son of Secure Act. The old inheritance rules, IRA creator dies today. The account is renamed as an inherited IRA. Funds distributed, natural beings, trust, or charities. Anytime I see a designated beneficiary form in an IRA that says to my children, 20%, to this charity, 20% to this, I get nervous on that. I like to see the IRAs bifurcated before we die. So if I have $100,000 in my IRA and my plan is to leave $20,000 to charity, go ahead and carve $20,000 out while I'm breathing. This way that IRA goes to charity and this IRA goes to whatever I'm trying to do. Okay, it gets a little interesting. When does the RMD start for natural beings? 3 withdrawal options. Remember the old days? Mom and dad die, I can take it out all at once. Remember the 5-year rule? Equal distributions over 5 years. Or I can do the stretch option. Everybody remember the stretch option rule? It was wonderful. Got an RMD like that. You're 33 years old, $200,000 in inherited IRA. Man, that thing would cook if you'd leave it alone. All right, pandemic came along, CARES Act, and then we had a new IRA distribution rule called the 10-year rule. The actual legislation started out at 5-year rule, but somehow in subcommittee it got changed to 10. I can't imagine who was trying to influence this from being 5 years to 10 years. Okay, yeah, we know who was influencing this thing. So now the rules are 10 years. Finally, with Secure Act 2, they addressed the problem because remember when Secure Act 1 came out, do we take an RMD? I don't know. You guys make a guess. We're telling our clients, we don't know. Some of us took them, some of them didn't. Subsequent language. Secure Act 1 was done in a hurry, not the best written piece of legislation. Secure Act 2 is beautiful. And I want to thank Wells Fargo. I'm not a big fan of Wells Fargo, but they led the charge and created this beautiful 273-page document and handed it to the one person writing Secure Act 2. The one person. And he went, this is gorgeous. And pretty much adopted over 99% of it. It was well done. So, thank you, Wells Fargo. The question about RMDs have been answered. Everybody knows that, right? You die now, inherit an IRA, 10-year rule, get it all out before 10 years, other big things. Huge benefits to special needs. Huge changes in the area of special needs. So if you have a special needs trust and you've got IRAs coming to it, huge relief is in there now. Big rule changes. Son of Secure Act. What? There were 4 little things that could have been interpreted better in Secure Act 2. It's these 4 things right here. And it has to do with the way that the sentence is written in respect to an age, a starting date. Very, very minor things. Does anyone remember the Pension Act of 1986? Pension Plan Act of 1986? It took us nearly a decade to clean that mess up. I'm feeling pretty good. This is going to get cleaned up in less than 5 years. Okay, beautiful job on Secure Act 2. If you want to see the technical letter here from the 4 congressmen involved with it, it's beautifully done. As we're getting toward the end, IRAs and 401ks are forever taxed. Are there any capital gains rules with IRAs? Any distribution principle IRAs? It is always ordinary income, okay? A few weird caveats, but overall, if I die subject to death taxes, it's on my 706. What's left over is ordinary income to my kids. So we see a blended rate of 62%. My question to you is, if I have a client subject to death taxes, why do they have any money in an IRA or a 401k? If I told you today that every dollar you're putting into your 401k is going to be taxed federally at 62% minimum, and pray to God your kids are in Florida or Texas or Nevada, how much would you keep putting in that 401k? You would. So the financial industry is doing a terrible job of helping people understand this. Why? Why? Who can tell me why the financial planning industry is not advocating stop putting money in your multi-million-dollar IRA because you're subject to estate taxes? Why? Commissions. I have yet to see a letter come from a financial institution say, hey, make certain you never have IRAs where your estate's subject to estate taxes because the tax bill is going to be enough to kill a horse. Has anyone seen that letter yet? So I'm beating up on the financial industry a little bit just because they don't do a good enough job of helping their clients make wise wealth decisions. I did this little chart. If I'm not subject to estate taxes, my IRA is going to get about a 40% haircut on average. 60% goes to the kids tax-free. If I am subject to estate taxes, 40% haircut, income tax, kids are going to get a decent amount of money. And then the thing I want you guys to look up is Code Section 691C that has to do with income in respect to a decedent. So here's the child in my office. Mom and dad had a taxable estate. They had a qualified plan. They paid estate taxes. There's an IRD calculation here for the kid. There's technically a benefit for the kid's tax return. On Schedule A, at the bottom, other, you can write in, mom and dad paid a boatload of money in death taxes. And there's apparently a calculation under 691C that can help the kids not pay even more tax, because if we don't claim it, we're 79% federal. IRAs on estates that are subject to death taxes, that's a tough number to sell. And we haven't had enough people die yet with these IRAs subject to estate taxes, which 2026, many of you may start experiencing this. Mom and dad died. They're over the lifetime unified credit. Ooh, here's an IRA. Ooh, I'm doing the 706. Boy, this is going to be a bad meeting with the kids. How are we doing on time, Tony? QCD, Qualified Charitable Distribution. Anybody heard this word before? So here's my client. They're philanthropically motivated. Oh, I love to walk and talk. They're philanthropically motivated. They're over 70.5 years of age. So this rule did not change. That started way back here. QCDs, some people call it the charitable IRA rollover. But if I'm over 70.5, notice this number does not correlate with the RMD age. Remember, the RMD age is going from 73 to 74 to 10. I guess we're going to go to 100 at some point. So here's the deal. At 70.5, I can make a distribution from my IRA, straight from the IRA, straight to a public charity, up to $100,000. So let's think this through. Let's say I have a client who has an estate subject to estate taxes, and they're giving to charity. I want to raid that IRA for QCD first. Get that money out of the IRA instead of out of their checkbook or off their portfolio. Take the hot asset, move that $100,000 to charity. Now, they don't get a tax deduction for it, but in effect, they do. If they're subject to death taxes and I'm moving $100,000 out of their death tax calculation, I just saved them $40,000 in death taxes, didn't I? Are the kids happier? Yeah. I mean, how many kids want to inherit $1 million hot taxable asset versus here's $1 million step up in basis tax free? You know, they might be from Alabama, but chances are they're not. Okay? Gift cannot go from the qualified plan to a DAF supporting org, private foundation. It can only go to an operating public charity. It's a beautiful thing. It's a hammer for estate taxes. Just get rid of it. Are we learning this whole thing about timing, combining, and sequencing? I mean, I beat this to death everywhere I go because that's our value to the clients. Rolling into the end of this thing, because I only got a few more minutes here. Chapter 17, 90-90 rule. 90% of the people live to age 90, die with 90% of their IRA intact because all they ever took out was the RMD. Okay. Here's Tim and Susan Miller. Tim died a couple of years ago. They want to transfer the estate to the kids, preferably no tax, free from lawsuits. Wow, what a concept. Tim passed. She's 80, 4 kids, home's worth $400, cash and stock $400, complete IRA $800,000. This is every street corner for us, isn't it? How many clients do we have like this? That's a lot of people. Okay, kids, doctor, successful, killing it. Mary, well, she's not in a good marriage. At Tim's funeral, her husband was heard saying, I can't wait for mom to kick off because I've got my eye on a new truck and bass boat. Nothing wrong with bass boats, by the way. Rocky marriage, I used my picture because I didn't feel right saying something here. I'm in a good marriage, 42 years. I don't know why she hadn't run off. Dan, currently divorced again, can't manage money. He's a problem. Now we know when mom and dad are both gone, who is Dan going to be knocking on the door? The kids, the siblings. I need help. Tax issues, step up in basis on the house, cash and stock step up in basis, tax forever. All at once, they can take it out if they want to. They can take it out over 10 years under the 10-year rule. It's just a balancing act. The problem I have with inherited IRAs is most inherited IRAs hit the kids when they're in their peak earning years. And with the new 10-year rule, it's going to push these kids most likely into a higher tax rate. Okay, so they're paying more tax on the money they actually work for. And if we don't get all the money out in 10 years, a whopper penalty. By the way, who's in charge of making certain the accounts are fully depleted in 10 years? Client. So mom and dad, date of death for both of them, 10 years. We have a risk exposure, 1099-R distributions and everything. Here's the solution. The non-taxable estate goes out to the kids according to the distribution plan. Have the IRA go into a testamentary charitable trust or a dry trust, a trust that's just sitting there. The designated beneficiary form says IRA goes to the charitable trust. Charitable trust gives out money for 20 years because that's the max I can do on a testamentary charitable trust. Kids get an distribution of $896,000. Look at my, this is just moderate payout rates. Charity's going to pick up nearly $900,000 after 20 years. We just gave this piece of crap away twice. Not even subject to death taxes. I love this strategy. When we showed this to mom, she's crying her eyeballs out. I wish Tim was here. We've always wanted to give this kind of money, but we couldn't. Love this strategy. Actual case, love this strategy. IRA to CRUT, there's a degree of asset protection outside of everybody's taxable estate. 20-year payout, charity gets a nice big gift. IRS does get less. They still get some. Susan has peace of mind. Kids will be able to get a distribution scheme. It's a beautiful thing. Mike, walk-in lawsuit as a doctor. Mary, there's other things I wish we would do for Mary because the worst thing we can do for Mary is leave her an outright distribution in her current marital status. Okay? His wife's filing for divorce today. If we give Dan all of his IRA money today, what's he going to do with it? I'll spend it. And then the tax bill shows up next year because they only withhold 20%. For the rest of Susan's life, she gets full control of her IRA. We haven't touched her IRA. We've just created the form that says when she dies, do this. She can change the beneficiary form every day. Kids with a safety net. Church gets a fat gift. Tim will be proud of her. When we compare $1 million being outright 10-year or charitable trust rules, when we just look at the numbers, just being apple to apple, pretty cool. Well, one thing I will say about inherited IRAs, if you have not read up on Clark v. Ramaker Supreme Court decision from 2014, basically inherited IRAs do not have bankruptcy judgment protection. So if little Joey has $1 million inherited IRA and he ends up in a judgment for BK purposes, he could lose the entire IRA and have to take money out of his pocket to pay the taxes on the judgment. Clark v. Ramaker, 2014 Supreme Court. The question has been definitively answered. inherited IRAs have no bankruptcy protection for the kids. And we're down to the last thing. How many minutes I got? Are we learning? Kind of pulling all this together, secret sauce. I showed this slide at a $330 million exit down in San Francisco about 8 years ago, and everybody laughed until I finished, and the wife was kicking her husband under the table going, that's what we're going to do. Rule number one, if you're a business owner, run it like it's for sale every day. John and Mary, they have an S Corp worth 5.5. They own the building worth 5.5. They want to sell their business next year. What's their estimated taxes? So I'm just using round numbers. Remember, Alabama, I got to make it simple for me to teach it. Okay. Tax bill on the biz, commercial building, recapture, fully depreciated. $11 million transaction, go home net of tax 7.3, donation to the IRS and FTB charity 3.6. This is every day. We do the 8594, we do whatever. These are the numbers. You called me after the transaction's done. Or we give the building to a charitable trust. When I sell the building in a charitable trust, what's my tax bill? 0. No tax planning. We know that deal. Remember, they're going to live about 30 years. Over here, we end up with a nice deduction because of the gift to charity. Client had $135,000 tax exposure. They're kind of like, I'll just stroke the check. So we claim that deduction. We offset the tax bill. We end up with $11 million under management. Here we end up with 7.3 under management, 6% ROI. Which one of these two income streams do you want for the rest of your life? Kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? Timing, combining, and sequencing, helping the client understand early, showing the client, give highly appreciated, poorly performing stock first. Here's how we make money off the IRS. 8 years later in your office, we're getting ready to sell our business and our building. Any ideas? Yeah, we got this charitable trust thing. Does it work like that stock thing? Yes. Okay, it's pretty cool. Let's go. They've already learned how to make money off the charity structures. We're killing it here. So sadly, they're going to have to somehow suffer with an extra $219,000 of annual income. The poor things. No tax planning, good tax planning. The extra $219,000, somebody said, Ed, you just gave away the building. The kids just got totally taken out of the estate plan. All right, we'll take $55,000, buy a stupid life insurance policy, park it outside the taxable estate. The IRS just paid for this life insurance policy. Now, the IRS is not going to come down here and write the life insurance. An actual life insurance agent is going to have to write this thing. But the point is, this is pretty simple planning, but it's an educational process to help the client understand before they get to the taxable event. Are we learning? The heirs, for the purposes of keeping apples to apples, I'm having mom and dad consume every stinking dollar they get every year. They're burning it up. Gambling, you name it. The strategy here, assuming they have no wealth accumulation whatsoever, turned a $7 million asset into $18 million with $7 million going to charity when they're deceased. This is fun. We're at the end. Are we on time? You owe me $5. Tony's like, there's no way you can get all that done. I even brought about 14 extra slides just in case I finished early. See if there's any questions. And while he's doing that, we covered a ton of material, okay? I hope that you take away from this that charitable tax planning is not just for Warren Buffett. It's for our everyday client. They have a $400,000 to $800,000 home. They have poorly performing assets. They're going to give to charity with or without your involvement. They're going to give. We can kind of go, hey guys, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? There's a couple extra steps. If you do this better, you'll have this type of benefit. And it never fails. When I start showing people, when we start calculating numbers, and they go, oh my gosh. I did one case where this is crazy. They were young. It was a huge tax event. We moved things around. They were very philanthropically motivated. because they're so young and the options that they chose, $135 million going to go to charity. We only seeded this thing with about 3.5 million. It is crazy when you start running some of these numbers. Any questions from the World Wide Web out there? Are any of them still awake? They're involved. All right. Last call for questions, because I know you guys are ready to hit that bar because you've been waving at the bartender for like the last 20 minutes. She's got all kind of liquor lined up for you out there. No questions? Thank you for letting me be here with you guys tonight, okay? If you want a copy of my book, be sure and grab it.